What's going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters Allstar video, and today we are going to be taking a look at Lunatic Guild Raid and giving you guys some advice as well as some different team comps and tips in order to maximize your score and hopefully use as few keys as humanly possible on this mode. But before we get into all that, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. Helps me out a ton as a new YouTuber. So let's go ahead and get into this guide. So when it comes to Lunatic Guild Raid, I was admittedly a little bit on the fence as to whether or not I wanted to do this yet, only because there is a pretty small amount of characters and team comps right now that are really viable for this, and in my opinion, it is going to be necessary to at least have a level 90 Elizabeth in order to even make this worth trying every day. So, for those of you who have not taken a look at this yet, and I'll show you, we've talked about this in the past, but this is going to be your different rewards for this mode, as well as the different scores you're going to need to achieve in order to get these boxes. So, as a rule of thumb, unless you are going to be able to hit these numbers down here, it's probably better off if you just stick with Expert, because Expert is going to have these Starlight stones in these boxes here, as I'm sure most of you already know. They're right there at the top. And so with Lunatic, what you're really wanting to do, it isn't even just your Starlight stones in here that you're wanting to really get to this for. It's for the fact that it also has your Bleed stones in here as well as your Burn stones. So this is actually a pretty nice little pool. If you take a look at it, there's quite a few stones in here that you would want. And a lot of people would want these Bleed stones. Really, primarily, they're going to be trying to go for the green ones, hopefully for their Gonets and so on and so forth. So this is a very valuable box. There's some very nice stuff in here. However, the scores needed to achieve this box are very high. You're going to need a minimum of 714 million damage in order to get to this point. And so, therefore, really the way that you look at that at the end of the day is you're honestly going to want a minimum, in my opinion, of about 300 million damage per run in order to do this on 3 keys. Now, it's potentially possible to do well more than that. It depends on how well built up your characters are, specifically your Elizabeth. But if you can do the maximum box on 3 keys, then you're in fine shape. It's even better, obviously, if you can do it on 2. However, that can prove to be very difficult because that would require you to do around 360 million damage. And the most damage I've even been able to do on my runs is about 346 or so. And that's kind of the cutoff so far for me. I'm sure I will end up breaking that at some point, but it can be like pulling teeth in order to do that with some of these teams right now. We just don't have a lot of good Starlight dealers. So that makes it a little bit difficult overall, and therefore on 3 keys I feel like should be the goal. Now, the way that you're going to do that, though, is you're going to, like I said, at least need Elizabeth. Now, I've seen some people say that they can achieve 300 million damage per run without Elizabeth, and I do not see evidence of that. Now, I'm not saying that those people are incorrect. However, I have not seen a single video that has shown me evidence that this is achievable, 300 million damage that is, without Elizabeth. And so therefore, until I see that, I don't feel apt to recommend any of that kind of stuff to you guys as far as those team comps that they've talked about, because I need to be able to see that for myself. So for those of you who may have seen it, if there's a video floating around out there, go ahead and leave it in the comment section, and I would be glad to check it out. Again, I just don't see the evidence of that. I have not seen that, so I don't want to talk about that in this video and recommend that to people if I don't know that that is necessarily something that's attainable. So, that all being said, let's talk about what is attainable and what you can do, whether you're a free-to-play player or a veteran player, a whale, whatever the case may be. So let's talk about the budget team first. And this is going to be your budget team of choice. Now, the first thing that I would say to you is, in order to get through this, you're going to need to be able to build up these characters first. This is very endgame material. So, therefore, you're really going to want these characters built up to such a point to where they aren't just going to get stunned and then one shot. Honestly, I could see that happening to a character like Iori or to Gonitz if you've only got them at Awakening level 10 or whatever the case may be. Now, granted, if you're underneath those levels anyway, underneath, like, I would say, honestly, Awakening level 30 or 40, you may be better off just avoiding Lunatic altogether and sticking with Expert difficulty, because I do not see it being possible for you to necessarily hit the numbers that we're talking about in this video, and so therefore it's probably a better investment of your keys for your guild just to stick with the Expert mode, because you're going to want to wait until you can further awaken some of these characters. So if you have not seen my other guides on the guild raid, then I will try to at least briefly summarize a few things here, because a lot of this still remains the same in some of these points that I'm going to bring up. So first and foremost, Orochi Iori is your de facto leader for this team. Really, he's just there to buff the Gonitz. Now, there are not a lot of other options, in my opinion, to make this kind of go free-to-play. Honestly, I feel like you want to really just kind of look at this as Elizabeth is probably going to eat all of the stuns and the nukes because she can take them better than the other two, as well as have Ashe on her striker to give her a heal, which we'll get to. But the other two characters, really, all you're doing with the Gonitz is you're just using him to shred the shield. That's all you're doing. So do not make him the primary target of the nuke from Rugal, otherwise he's going to have a bad time. But using him in conjunction with the striker that is chosen here, which we'll talk about also, you're basically just using him to have Elizabeth come out, get the S1 on the Rugal so that he has Starlight on him, and then switch her out to the Gonitz, and you will see the shield just melt. And we will get into a run that I did that was over 300 million damage with my team that I use, but we'll get to that, and I'll talk to you guys throughout that run about a few little things that you'll want to do strategy-wise. But that's kind of the idea with this team. You're never even really going to use the Iori, to be honest. Really, he's just there to have his leadership ability and to have the healing striker so that, you know, maybe you have the Iori out real quick, swap him in, use the striker, swap him out real quick for one of the other two characters that are the battery of the team that make the team go. But really, you are trying to buff your Gonitz as much as possible, because he is going to be, as I said, somebody you're going to lean on to shred shield, and even when the shield is down, you can use the Iori there because he does good damage overall. But outside of that, you're never going to really use him when the shield is up. You're not really going to do a whole lot with him outside of shield down scenarios, if that all makes sense. So, speaking about the strikers here, though, since I feel like everybody kind of knows how these other characters work, since they're pretty popular characters or they're characters that have been around a while, let's talk about the strikers real quick. So on Iori, we have Athena 98. And the reason why you're using Athena 98 is for her striker's ability, which is going to recover HP of the active team members by 3% every second for 10 seconds. Now, this is important because in Lunatic Guild Raid, this boss does a ton of damage. And so therefore, you really need to be careful with your kind of rotations of your characters and make sure that somebody is not getting nuked that can't take it. It is very tough to get through this damage-wise sometimes. Even for me, on some of my characters, it can be tough. So you got to be a little bit careful. So that all being said, that is why you would be using this Athena. This is, in my opinion, probably one of the better healers in the game for strikers. So we're using her, and I would recommend using her for pretty much any of these types of runs. You're going to use her at some point somewhere on one of these characters. Now, next up on Elizabeth, we have Ashe. So with Ashe, if you look at his striker ability, his has active team members gain super armor for 3 seconds and recover HP by 12%. That is very, very strong. That is very, very nice. However, if we also take a look here, and I will show you guys, if we go to Elizabeth, we go to her relations. So you're going to see that is going to be her relation effect that she gets with Ash. She's going to increase her attack by 10%, decrease penetration by 500, and decrease her skill cooldowns by 1 second. So she does also have a relation bonus to him, which is very nice, but really, as you probably gathered, the sustain with the super armor as well as the HP recovery with Ash makes him perfect for this. So that's part of the reason why we're using him here. Very good striker overall for her and for this mode, and I would highly recommend using him as the striker with her in most cases. Now, when it comes to this final striker, and by the way, guys, people have tried to figure this out. I have not been able to kind of pinpoint an answer on this, so maybe somebody has an answer to this in the comments section and can let us know. But on her course here, you're going to see Elizabeth is going to have increases penetration by 700 when Ash is on the team. If that effect works with him as a striker and not as an active team member, let me know, because I do not know, I do not have confirmation on that. But if it does work with him as a striker and not just him on the lineup for the team, that's really good. So, moving on to Gonitz here. Gonitz is going to have an interesting choice here. He's going to have this Leona. And why does he have this Leona? Well, he has this Leona because she increases the active team member's critical damage by 30% for 10 seconds. Now, this is important on this comp, and the reason it's important on this comp is because, again, you do not want to get into a position where the shield is up and you get juggled with any of these characters. Elizabeth, debatable, she can kind of eat it and be fine, especially having Ash on striker. But you don't want to get juggled, and you don't want to get nuked, so you want the shield down as soon as possible. Being that she gives a massive increase to your crit damage for 10 seconds, she is a phenomenal pick for this. I would highly recommend her as a striker for this team, but really, if you guys want alternative strikers, my recommendation would be to go with other healers, or maybe even Okita or something like that. Another character that is going to give you buffs to your crit is always nice. But yeah, overall, I feel like these should be characters that most of you have, and these should be characters that you can use for this that are going to be phenomenal. For a free-to-play comp, I feel like this is pretty solid, and this will do you just fine. I've seen people do very good runs with the team pretty much identical to this. I've used this and gotten pretty darn close to, I think the highest I got with this team was about 260 or so million, which is right in the wheelhouse where we want to be. So, your mileage may vary, depends on how your characters are built up, but that is my recommendation for the free-to-play team. Like I said, other strikers you could use, other team members, however, for this comp. We'll get into other comps, but as far as other free-to-play characters, you're getting into kind of deep water there. It's tough with Lunatic. Like I said, very small pool of characters I feel that reliably are going to get you to kind of a 2 to 3 at max key scenario on this. So let's go ahead and move on. We're going to talk about a few teams that are a little bit more veteran friendly, a little bit more high budget. So this is going to be the first team I want to talk about. So this team is going to be for the people who use PC, emulator, controller, all that fun stuff. This is the team that you're going to want to use. Now, Eileen basically is just a damage nuke. Very similar to why you would be using Gonitz in the previous team, honestly. That's kind of what you're looking at with her. However, the big thing with her is she's able to spam her skills and spam her finishers primarily much better. So overall, if you're somebody that has those things that you use to play the game, this would be the team I would recommend. And as far as your leader goes, Boss Syndrome, Omega Rugal, it goes without saying it's Boss Syndrome Omega Rugal. He really is your answer if you just need a high damage dealer for these types of modes. And his overall vanilla leadership skill is nice for this too, being that he increases the attack of all fighters by 45%. So you can use that for this team and get some mileage out of that. Not a whole lot to say about this team outside of those things. As far as strikers go, you can get by on this one without having as many of the healing strikers and things like that. Because honestly, you're going to be stopping the clock so often that you can kind of get by, and Rugal can eat a lot of the nukes, as well as we've established, Elizabeth can as well. So overall, with Rugal having the heal on his finisher, he kind of eats that and doesn't really worry about it too much. But he does have, thankfully, the striker ability on this other Rugal here that I will show you guys. That is going to decrease all enemies' attack by 11.6% for 10 seconds and recovers 1.2% of the active team member's HP every second. So that is very nice. He obviously also is going to have the relation effect to that Rugal. As you'll see here, Leap increases attack by 15% if HP is 70% or more, increases his attack speed by 5%, and decreases his skill cooldowns by 1 second. So overall, that is a really, really good, valuable striker for this mode for him, and I would recommend that one. As far as Psyche on Elizabeth here, and kind of getting away from Ashe on here, now if you take a look at this, his regular striker skill doesn't really leave it's not anything that great. It's going to decrease target's attack speed and movement speed by 20% for 5 seconds upon landing skill. It's really not anything special. Really what you're using that one for is for his relation effect to her. That's going to be obtains 20% of power at the start of the stage, obtains 10% of power when using an ultimate move, and decreases skill cooldowns by 1 second. Again, this team is a clock stop team. That's what this team's trying to do. So the approach here is a little bit different if you're using this team comp. However, you could very well easily use the Ashe and be fine. In fact, when we get to the next team, we'll talk about that just a tad. But now, as far as Eileen goes, Eileen is going to be taking advantage of Rachel as the striker, and that's kind of the de facto striker, really, for Eileen. And it doesn't, I mean, really, you can use pretty much any of the Seven Knights characters and be fine there. So, overall, this is, like I said, going to be for those of you who like to use your macros, your emulators, your, peripherals, like your remotes and things like that. So if you're using a controller especially, this can be really nice because you can take full advantage of the speed that you'll get out of that. If you're on mobile, you're probably not going to get as much out of this team. So that's pretty much for those guys. That's another comp you can use. Now, the comp that I use. This is the comp that I'm going to use in the run that I'm going to show you guys. And not a lot changes from what we've already talked about with this team comp. This team comp is pretty much similar. It's kind of a hybrid of the other two. Now, with this, basically, the way I do it, and you'll kind of see, is I use Elizabeth to just really apply the Starlight and then lean on the other two characters' overall just raw damage output to crash the shield as fast as possible. And then all that really happens as far as the nuke goes is either Boss Syndrome Omega Rugal is going to eat it, or Elizabeth is going to eat it. And that's kind of how that goes. We protect the Gonads, as I talked about previously with the other teams. So, with the strikers, pretty much the fair we've already talked about. The Athena 98 on the Gonads, and then the Ashe on the Elizabeth for the heals. That way, endgame wise, because really for this team, the biggest thing is we want to try and get as many rotations out of the Awakening with the shield down on the Rugal as possible to do as much damage as possible. But that is why towards the end game you'll want these healers, especially because it's going to be tough once you get below a minute for these characters to kind of eat many more of those nukes. So that all being said, that's kind of the different team comps. Like I said, it is a shallow pool. And if you guys have recommendations, definitely leave them in the comments. I want this to be kind of a living guide for right now, because this is going to be the one that updates the quickest, I feel, because once we get more Starlight characters, this is going to change completely. And for those of you wondering about Mian, you can use Mian, and I'm sure that you can do okay. However, I have seen plenty of footage now. I talked about this a little bit briefly yesterday. I've seen plenty of footage now on Mian and Lunatic to tell me that she's really not that great in it. She's okay, but she's not anything special. My recommendation is if you really want to take Lunatic Guild Raid seriously, get an Elizabeth. But that's pretty much going to be it for the team comps, guys. Hopefully this is beneficial to you guys. Hopefully this free-to-play team helps you guys out a little bit. Now, let's talk about cards real briefly, and then we'll get into the actual run. So, as far as cards go, it doesn't really honestly change much from anything else that you would normally be doing. When it comes to Elizabeth, there's pretty much a case to be made. You can use your Kaya set if you want to. and this is going to be the Kaya set for those that are not aware of what it is. But basically, you can use this for the extra defense to attack conversion, because she has phenomenal defense to attack conversion, or you can just use a Leah set. Beyond that, if you don't have either of those, you can use an Akane set, although I do feel like you definitely want one of those other two sets. Really, the kind of tiering of your Fest cards and things of that nature, they don't change for this from the normal, for the most part. You just have the extra added kind of thought there with her that you can actually use a Kaya set and do really well with it. So, really, it's up to you. I like to use this Gintama one, but you can use something else here. Really, option cards just come down to what you have and just using the best available for the character on your options. Really, the Leona option, in my opinion, is one of the best in the game, period. So, you definitely, if you have that, use that. But overall, your option cards just comes down to what you need. Now, on Gonitz, you can actually use this card here and get a lot of work out of it, because the extra crit, as we've talked about, why that's important for the shield shred, just to get it gone as fast as possible, because you don't want these characters taking damage. Very, very, very important there. If you want to use that one, you can. Otherwise, again, just default to your cooldown reduction ones. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much going to be it for cards, guys. I mean, it really isn't difficult. It isn't kind of complicated. It just comes down to using the kind of, if you don't have Leah, use Akane, and then from there it comes down to what do you have available. If you don't have either of those two, with Elizabeth, you can use Kaya set if you want to, otherwise default back to what we just said about Leah or Akane, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's going to be kind of it, guys, for team comps, cards, so on and so forth. You know, really, like I said, it comes down to what you got, comes down to what you can do. If you can't make this work on 2 to 3 keys, which it is difficult, I will say that, it is not easy to do. This is a more difficult raid than the other ones, but we're going to go ahead, we're going to show you guys a 300+ million damage run, and hopefully give you guys a few little tips and some points of advice throughout it that'll help you with your runs. So let's take a look. Alright, so getting into this run here. Now again, the idea is we want to try and ideally be able to get ourselves to a point where we can do this every day at 300 to 355 million damage per run, so that we can do this on about 2 to 3 keys per day. Now, we're going to aim for 3 with this, because 2 is going to be extremely difficult, but it is doable if you have enough investment on these characters and you are patient enough and can get yourself to a point where you can do these runs as well as possible. So kind of the rules remain the same with this. Basically what you're going to want to do is, first and foremost, always remember your strikers. I am even guilty of that sometimes. I'll forget a striker every now and again, and that can really ruin your run. So you need to be careful with that, but as you'll see here, my basic overall tips and strategy throughout kind of my descriptions of the teams remains the same, no matter what you're doing, you know, with whatever team you're picking of the ones that I recommended, or even if you are using a different team, you're always going to kind of want to go through the same kind of strategies for best use, and that is going to be really if you use Betty as kind of just a Starlight dealer to get the dot on, and then swap into, say for instance, Gonitz as a primary shield shredder, in order to just get the shield off as fast as humanly possible, and then once the shield is down, switch into whatever your nuke is. In this instance, if you're using the variant of the team using the Boss Syndrome Omega Rugal, that would be him, and you want to get as many awakening rotations with the shield down on this boss as possible with him to just deal as much damage as you possibly can, because that's really going to be where the bulk of your damage comes from with a team comp such as this. And you'll see it here. You know, I've already gotten in one awakening rotation with the shield down and done a ton of damage, and now we're working towards getting our awakening rotation back up. So big thing to keep in mind, no matter what team you're using, whenever his shield is about to go back up, you want to maybe consider swapping whatever character you have in that you've been attacking him with the shield down with out for a character that can take the nuke, because there is every potential that he is going to use his nuke the second that his shield goes back up. He doesn't do it every time, but with the Lunatic Guild Raid boss, it tends to be the case with him. That tends to be when he likes to use his nuke, like you'll see right there. So if you want to, for instance, have your exploit available to you with having your finisher available, so that right as his shield is going back up and you're expecting him to try and nuke you, you can smash your finisher to try and avoid the damage. Again, you can never avoid the stun part, but you can avoid the damage. Then you can try and time that. That actually will save you quite a bit of headaches. Or if you, like I said, just want to swap into whatever character you need to eat the nuke, whatever character you've designated for that purpose. Maybe that character has the healing striker. You can even safely swap into Betty at that point. She usually is going to have Ash as her striker, at which point that she also has access to a heal. So really just pay attention to his nuke. That is the biggest thing, and he does tend to like to use it the second that his shield goes back up. So you can kind of plan for it a little bit. Now, overall, it's going to be a situation where you're basically just going to try and avoid getting juggled by him as much as possible. So pay attention, try to switch like I just did. Try to switch when he is in the middle of a skill, so that whatever you're switching into, he isn't just going to immediately try to take advantage of them and juggle them. Or you can even maybe roll behind him real quick and then switch. Whatever is going to save you from taking a bunch of damage is ideal here in these scenarios. But we're doing a really good job of swapping in and out of our characters, using them in their specific roles that they've been dealt. And overall, that is kind of what you need to learn, and it takes practice. It really just comes down to knowing when to switch in and out of the characters that you know you need to switch into at specific moments. Like right there, I switched into Betty so that she would take that, and then I could go back into using my Starlight, go to my Gonitz. Gonitz uses all of his skill rotations, and the shield is down. So that is why you use these characters this way, and you just kind of got to pay attention, like I said. There's little idiosyncrasies, but I hope this helps you guys to maximize your runs. That's really what the goal of this was to do. Like I said, 2 keys is probably an impossibility for 99% of players, but 3 keys is possible with some practice, with the proper investment, and with the proper builds and strikers. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you have teams that you prefer to use or like to use, let me know in the comment section down below. I love to hear those. That always helps the community. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I appreciate all of you for watching this very long video. Peace.
Continue.